Catherine Kate Lindholm was 28 years old when her neighbors decided her root cellar design was dangerous proof that she didn't understand either food storage or structural safety. It was August 1876 in the Minnesota Territory near St. Cloud, and the Scandinavian farming community had seen plenty of innovative storage solutions, but nobody had ever excavated a root cellar. Directly beneath their cabin floor, accessed by trapdoor, integrated into the living structure, rather than built as a separate external building. Kate's husband, Lars Lindholm, had died in April 1876 from injuries sustained when his wagon overturned during spring planting. He'd been 32, married to Kate for 6 years, a Norwegian immigrant farmer who'd built their small log cabin on 40 acres of claimed land. The cabin was modest, 16 feet by 20 feet, 320 square feet, but solid construction that Lars had built with help from neighbors. Lars's death left Kate alone on the farm, facing her first harvest and winter without him. The farm was productive. They'd cleared and cultivated approximately 8 acres, producing potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets, cabbage, and onions in quantities adequate for winter storage, with surplus for sale. But storing that harvest successfully through Minnesota winter was its own challenge. The conventional approach was building a separate root cellar, small structure, excavated into a hillside, or built partially underground, away from the cabin. Most farmers in the St. Cloud area had such cellars positioned 20 to 50 feet from their houses. The cellars worked adequately in moderate winters, but failed catastrophically during harsh cold. Kate had watched during the previous winter 1875 to 76, with Lars alive as their separate outdoor root cellar struggled with temperature control. During sustained cold periods below 0 Fahrenheit, the cellar would drop below freezing despite being underground. Potatoes and root vegetables would freeze, becoming mushy and inedible when thawed. They'd lost perhaps 30% of their stored food to freeze damage. Conversely, during warm spells or early winter before deep cold set in, the cellar would be too warm above 45 degrees, causing premature sprouting and rot. The temperature swings were the fundamental problem. Outdoor cellars exposed to exterior temperature extremes couldn't maintain the stable 35 to 40 degree range needed for optimal storage. Kate spent the summer of 1876 analyzing the problem and developing a radical solution: build the root cellar directly beneath the cabin floor, not in a basement under the entire cabin. That would be massive excavation, but a dedicated cellar chamber excavated beneath one section of the cabin, accessed by trapdoor in the floor. The integrated design would solve multiple problems. First, temperature stability. The cellar would benefit from the cabin's heat, preventing freezing during extreme cold, while the earth surrounding it would keep it cool during milder periods. The cabin floor above would insulate the cellar from severe temperature swings. Second, access convenience. Reaching the cellar would require opening a trapdoor and descending a ladder possible in any weather without going outdoors. No fighting through blizzards to reach food storage. Third, security. Integrated into the cabin structure, the cellar would be protected from animals and theft in ways outdoor cellars weren't. The concept inverted conventional wisdom about food storage and cabin construction. Normal approach: keep food storage separate from living space to prevent vermin, moisture problems, and structural issues. Kate's approach: integrate storage into the structure using careful design to prevent those problems while gaining temperature stability and access convenience. She found Lars's carpentry tools and surveying equipment, planned the structure carefully. The cellar would be excavated beneath the north end of the cabin, the coolest section, farthest from the fireplace on the south wall, would be 10 feet wide, 12 feet long, 7 feet deep. Access via a 4x4 trapdoor in the cabin floor, with ladder descent. The excavation would be done carefully to not undermine the cabin's foundation logs. The cabin sat on a stone foundation, with the floor elevated approximately 2 feet above ground level. She'd excavate beneath that floor, going down 7 feet total from ground level, creating adequate headroom. Construction would require stone walls for structural support and thermal mass, ventilation pipes for air circulation, sand beds for root vegetables, shelving for preserved goods, drainage to prevent water accumulation. The community's reaction when Kate explained the plan was immediate concern, mixed with genuine alarm. She was planning to dig a massive hole directly beneath her cabin, risking structural collapse, inviting vermin into her living space, creating moisture problems that would rot the floor above. The whole concept violated basic principles of cabin construction and food storage. Eric Johansson, age 45, a successful farmer and informal leader of the Norwegian community near St. Cloud, organized a visit in early August with 3 other farmers to convince Kate to abandon the plan before she destroyed her cabin and contaminated her living space. They stood in Kate's cabin as she explained the design, sketching it on paper. A 10 by 12 cellar chamber, 7 feet deep, beneath the north end of the cabin. Stone-lined walls, trapdoor access from the kitchen area, ventilation system, storage optimized for root vegetables and preserved foods. Kate, Eric said carefully, treating her as someone who didn't understand what she was proposing. Root cellars must be separate from living structures. If you excavate beneath your cabin, you'll undermine the foundation. The cabin could collapse, and even if it doesn't collapse, you'll have food storage directly beneath where you sleep and cook. Any rot or vermin will be in your living space. The excavation won't undermine the structure, Kate explained. The cabin sits on stone foundation posts at corners and intervals. I'll excavate between those posts, not beneath them. The stone cellar walls I build will actually add structural support. As for vermin and rot, proper design prevents both. The cellar will be sealed except for controlled ventilation. Temperature and humidity will be managed to prevent rot. Why not build a proper, separate cellar like everyone else? Asked Nils Bakken, age 38, a practical farmer who appreciated proven methods. Separate cellars work. We know they work. Your design is untested and risky. Separate cellars fail during temperature extremes, Kate countered. Last winter, we lost 30% of stored food to freeze damage when the outdoor cellar dropped below freezing. An integrated cellar beneath the cabin will maintain stable temperature, cool enough for storage, but protected from freezing by the cabin's heat above. The cabin's heat will make it too warm for storage, Eric argued. Root cellars need to stay cold 35 to 40 degrees. Your cabin interior is 60 to 70 degrees in winter. The heat will spoil your food. The cellar will be 7 feet deep beneath the floor, Kate explained. At that depth, with earth insulation and stone walls, the temperature will stabilize around 35 to 38 degrees, perfect for storage. The cabin heat prevents freezing without making it too warm. It's thermal balance. The men left, certain Kate was risking her home and her winter food supply on unproven theory that violated common sense. Construction began in Midogest, and Kate immediately confronted the challenge of excavating beneath an existing structure without causing collapse. Work that required both brute physical effort and careful engineering precision. The cabin floor had to be partially removed to access the excavation area. She carefully pulled up floor planks in a 10 by 12 section at the north end the area above where the cellar would be. Each plank was perhaps 12 feet long, 8 inches wide, 2 inches thick, heavy, solid timber weighing 30 to 40 pounds. She'd pry up nails using a crowbar, lift each plank, carry it outside for temporary storage. 40 planks total, over 1,000 pounds of lumber moved. This exposed the earth beneath the elevated cabin floor packed Minnesota clay soil, approximately 2 feet below the cabin floor level. The cabin sat on stone foundation posts with floor joists spanning between them. Now those joists were visible from below, and the earth they'd been built over was accessible for excavation. The excavation was methodical and cautious because removing earth beneath an existing structure risks collapse if foundation support is undermined. Kate couldn't just dig a massive hole. She had to understand the cabin's load-bearing structure and excavate carefully around it. The cabin's foundation consisted of large, flat stones positioned at each corner and at 6-foot intervals along the walls. These foundation stones, each weighing perhaps 200 pounds, supported the bottom logs of the cabin walls. The entire weight of the cabin rested on these strategic points. Kate's excavation would go between these foundation points, not beneath them. She'd dig down, removing earth from the spaces between foundation stones, while ensuring the stones themselves remained stable and supported. The excavation technique was progressive and careful. Start at the center of the marked area farthest from any foundation point. Dig down 6 inches across the 10 by 12 area. Check foundation stones to ensure they're stable. Dig another 6 inches. Check again. Repeat until reaching 7-foot target depth. The physical work was brutal for someone who weighed perhaps 125 pounds, attempting to move 41 tons of clay soil. She'd work with shovel and bucket dig, fill bucket with perhaps 40 pounds of earth, climb out of the growing pit via temporary ramps, dump the bucket outside, return, repeat. The progress was measured in bucket loads. At 40 pounds per bucket, she needed roughly 2,050 bucket loads to complete the excavation. Working efficiently, she might move 50 buckets per day 40 days of pure excavation labor. Stretched to perhaps 50 days, accounting for fatigue, weather delays, and the need to do other farm work. By the first week of September, 3 weeks of brutal work, she'd excavated to 4 feet depth. Standing in the pit, she could see the cabin floor joists above her, the foundation stones at the perimeter, the earth walls around her. The cabin above showed no signs of settling or structural stress. The foundation stones remained stable. The psychological challenge of working beneath an existing structure was constant. She'd be at the bottom of the pit, 7 feet below the cabin floor by the final excavation stage, with thousands of pounds of cabin structure above her head. The fear that it would collapse, bury her alive, was rational and had to be actively managed. She'd work methodically, check foundation stability constantly, talk herself through the fear. The cabin was built solidly. The foundation stones were massive and stable. The excavation wasn't undermining them. She was safe. Repeat and continue. As she approached 7-foot depth, by mid-September, she installed timber shoring, temporary support for the cabin floor joists above. Vertical posts at intervals supporting the joists prevented any sagging as earth beneath was removed. The shoring would remain until stone walls were built, providing permanent support. The total excavation ate 140 cubic feet, 41 tons was complete. By late September, she'd moved 2,000 bucket loads, worked 50 days of brutal labor, lost perhaps 15 pounds from the physical exertion. But the chamber was excavated without the cabin collapsing, without foundation failure, without injury. Standing at the bottom of the completed excavation, a 10 by 12 room, 7 feet deep, with cabin floor visible above, she felt both accomplished and terrified. This was the largest thing she'd ever built, and it was hidden beneath her home. The stone wall construction began in mid-September and was critical for both structural integrity and thermal performance. She couldn't leave bare earth walls; they'd erode, collapse, and wouldn't provide the thermal mass needed for temperature stability. She'd collected field stones during summer, gathered, perhaps, 300 stones, ranging from 10 to 50 pounds each, from fields and creek beds. Would build mortared stone walls, creating a proper chamber. The walls went up progressively, using clay mortar. Bottom course, laid carefully on the earth floor. Second course, overlapping joints, each course adding height and stability. The stone walls weren't load-bearing. For the cabin, the original foundation posts carried that load, but they provided structural integrity for the cellar and massive thermal mass. Stone has high thermal mass, absorbs, and releases heat slowly. These walls would help maintain stable temperature by resisting rapid temperature changes. When outside was 0 degrees, the thermal mass would prevent the cellar from cooling rapidly. When outside was 50 degrees, the thermal mass would keep the cellar cool. The walls went to 7-foot height, creating vertical surfaces from cellar floor to cabin floor above. At the top, the stone walls would support the cabin floor joists, providing additional structural support Lars's original construction hadn't had. The ventilation system was critical and required careful engineering. Root cellars need air circulation to remove ethylene gas produced by stored produce and to regulate humidity. But uncontrolled ventilation would create temperature swings, defeating the purpose of integrated design. Kate designed a dual pipe system, one intake pipe bringing fresh air into the cellar at floor level, one exhaust pipe removing stale air from ceiling level. The pipes would extend through the cabin floor and wall, exiting outside at different heights to create natural convection flow. The intake pipe 4 inches diameter, clay tile construction entered. The cellar at floor level, on the north wall, extended through the cabin wall to outside, opening at ground level. Cold, fresh air would enter here, sinking naturally to cellar floor. The exhaust pipe, also 4 inches diameter, exited the cellar at ceiling level on the opposite wall, extended up through the cabin floor, through the cabin space, through the roof. Warm, moist air would rise naturally, exiting through this high pipe. The elevation difference between intake and exhaust, approximately 9 feet vertical, would create natural convection. Cold air in, warm air out, continuous gentle circulation without fans or mechanical systems. By late September, the cellar structure was complete. Stone walls, earth floor, ventilation system, cabin floor above, supported by the stone walls. Now needed interior fittings for actual food storage. She built wooden shelving along 2 walls, sturdy planks on brackets for storing preserved foods in jars and crocks. The shelves would hold hundreds of pounds of good pickled vegetables, preserved meats, dried goods. Created sand beds on the earth floor for root vegetable storage. Sand maintains humidity around root vegetables while preventing direct contact that causes rot. She'd layer vegetables in sand, potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips, creating storage that would last months. built bins for cabbage and onions, vegetables that needed air circulation but cool temperature. The bins had slatted sides allowing airflow while containing the produce. Installed a simple ladder for accessed sturdy timber construction, allowing safe descent through the trapdoor opening. By early October, the integrated root cellar was complete and ready for harvest storage. Kate began filling it with the autumn harvest bushels of potatoes, turnips, carrots, beets, heads of cabbage, strings of onions, jars of pickled vegetables, and preserved meats. The cellar held approximately 60 bushels of root vegetables, plus preserved goods, adequate for winter, with surplus for spring sale. As she stored food, she monitored the cellar's performance. Temperature stabilized at 36 to 38 degrees, perfect for root storage. The cabin heat prevented freezing. The earth depth and stone mass kept it cool. Humidity maintained around 90%, adequate moisture to prevent shriveling, but not enough to cause rot. The ventilation system worked via natural convection. She could feel gentle air movement, the intake drawing fresh air in, the exhaust pulling stale air out. November brought the first real test as temperature dropped and neighbors' separate outdoor cellars began struggling with temperature control. Kate's integrated cellar proved superior in ways that transformed mockery into requests for advice. Outdoor cellars throughout the St. Cloud area faced the fundamental problem: temperature extremes. When exterior temperature dropped to 0 degrees, outdoor cellars, even underground, would approach freezing. The earth provided insulation but couldn't prevent temperature drop when cold persisted for days. Eric Johansson's outdoor cellar was well built, 8 feet deep, proper construction, but when temperatures sustained at -5 degrees for a week in late November, the cellar dropped to 28 degrees. His stored potatoes began freezing. He'd check the cellar daily, watch ice crystals forming on potato skins, understand he was losing food to freeze damage. Nils Backen's cellar faced the opposite problem during the mild early November period. With exterior temperature at 40 to 50 degrees and inadequate ventilation, his cellar warmed to 48 degrees. Potatoes began sprouting prematurely. Turnips developed soft rot. He'd lose perhaps 20% of stored food before serious winter cold arrived. Kate's integrated cellar maintained 36 to 38 degrees consistently regardless of exterior temperature swings. During the -5 cold snap, the cellar stayed at 37 degrees. The cabin heat above prevented freezing without making it too warm. During the mild early November period, the earth depth and thermal mass kept it cool at 36 degrees. She'd descend through the trapdoor weekly to check on stored food. The potatoes in sand beds were perfect: no sprouting, no shriveling, no freezing. Carrots, beets, turnips, equally good. Cabbage heads firm, onions dry and sound. The conditions were optimal. The convenience factor was remarkable compared to outdoor cellars. When she needed potatoes for cooking, she'd open the trapdoor in her cabin floor, descend the ladder, gather what she needed, return to the kitchen. Total time perhaps 3 minutes, all indoors, regardless of weather. Neighbors with outdoor cellars would bundle up, go outside, walk 20 to 50 feet to the cellar entrance, descend into cold storage, gather food, return through outdoor weather. In blizzard conditions, this could be dangerous. In severe cold, it was miserable. December brought sustained cold and heavy snow that proved Kate's integrated design superior to conventional cellars in ways that made the criticism stop and the requests for help begin, and demonstrated that conventional wisdom about food storage was fundamentally wrong for Minnesota extremes. Temperature dropped to -10 degrees on December 8 and didn't rise above zero for the next 2 weeks. Sustained Arctic outbreak that overwhelmed conventional outdoor storage systems throughout the St. Cloud region. This wasn't unusual Minnesota weather. It was typical severe winter, but it was weather that conventional cellars couldn't handle, despite generations of farmers believing they worked adequately. The mathematics were brutal for outdoor cellars. Exterior air temperature -10 degrees sustained. Earth at 8 feet depth naturally maintained around 45 degrees when undisturbed, but sustained surface cold would penetrate progressively deeper, cooling the earth and anything stored in it. Conventional outdoor cellars, even well-built ones 8 feet deep, would fight losing battle against sustained surface cold. The earth insulation delayed temperature drop, but couldn't prevent it when cold persisted for days. After 3 days at -10, outdoor cellars would drop to 35 degrees. After a week, 30 degrees. After 2 weeks, 25 to 28 degrees below freezing, despite being 8 feet underground. Eric Johansson's cellar was textbook proper construction. 8 feet deep, stone-lined walls, adequate size, good drainage, everything conventional wisdom recommended. He'd built it himself 15 years earlier, stored food successfully through many winters, but during the December -10 cold snap, his cellar failed catastrophically. He'd check it daily, descending into the cold underground space, watching the temperature drop progressively. Had a simple thermometer hanging on the wall, watched it fall from 38 degrees to 35 to 32 to 28 degrees over the 2-week period. By day 10, he saw ice crystals forming on potato skins. The potatoes were freezing from the outside in. He'd pick one up, feel it firm and frozen on the surface. Over the next 3 days, the freezing penetrated deeper. By day 14, the potatoes were frozen solid, 200 pounds of winter food destroyed. Frozen vegetables look normal, but when they thaw, the ice crystals that formed in their cells rupture cell walls. The vegetables become mushy, watery, inedible. A frozen then thawed potato is useless. Eric's winter storage, 60% of his family's food supply for the next 4 months, was destroyed by freeze damage. Nils Backen's cellar faced identical failure. 26 degrees by the end of the cold snap. Everything frozen. His family of 4 faced winter with perhaps 40% of their food storage viable. They'd need to purchase replacement food at winter prices double the autumn harvest prices, creating financial hardship. The pattern repeated throughout the St. Cloud farming community. Outdoor cellars that had worked adequately in average winters failed catastrophically during the sustained severe cold that occurred every few years. Farmers would lose 50 to 75% of stored food. Families would face hunger in late winter when stored food ran out and spring planting hadn't yet produced. Kate's integrated cellar maintained 37 degrees throughout the entire 2-week cold snap, despite the cabin interior being maintained at 65 degrees with normal heating. The thermal balance was exactly as she'd calculated. Cabin heat prevented freezing penetration, while earth depth and stone thermal mass prevented the cellar from warming above optimal storage temperature. She'd descend weekly through the trapdoor to check conditions and gather food for cooking, would climb down the ladder into the 37-degree chamber, walk among the sandbeds holding perfect root vegetables, select what she needed, return to the warm cabin above. The convenience and reliability were remarkable compared to the crisis her neighbors faced. By day 10 of the cold snapped December 21st, The shortest day of the year, Eric Johansson made the difficult decision to visit Kate, seeking both advice and food purchase. His pride resisted admitting that the cellar design he'd criticized had succeeded where his conventional approach failed. But his family's hunger outweighed pride. He arrived at Kate's cabin mid-afternoon, knocked, was invited in to warmth. The cabin was comfortable, perhaps 65 degrees fire burning normally in the fireplace. Kate offered coffee. They sat. Eric explained his situation. "My cellar is at 25 degrees, he said quietly. "Everything is frozen. 200 pounds of potatoes destroyed. Turnips, carrots, beets all frozen. We'll be hungry by March if I can't buy replacement food. I need to purchase from your stores if you're willing to sell." "Of course," Kate said. "But first, come see why my storage succeeded where yours failed." She led him to the trapdoor in the kitchen floor for beef, opening with hinged cover, currently closed. Eric had never seen it, hadn't known exactly where or how her cellar was accessed. Kate opened the trapdoor, revealing the ladder descending into darkness below. A wave of cool air rose through the opening, noticeably cooler than the cabin, but not the bitter cold of outdoor winter. "This is beneath your cabin floor?" Eric asked, still processing. "The cellar you dug under your living structure that we said would collapse and fill your home with rot." "The same cellar," Kate confirmed. "Descend and see." Eric climbed down the ladder, simple timber construction, very sturdy, descending through the cabin floor into the space below. Reached the bottom and stood in the cellar chamber. The space was remarkably well built. Stone walls 7 feet high, mortared carefully, creating solid vertical surfaces. Earth floor covered partially with sand beds. Wooden shelving along 2 walls holding preserved goods. Ventilation pipes visible. And most importantly, the temperature was noticeably cool, but not freezing cold. Eric had brought his thermometer, hung it on a wall peg, waited 2 minutes for accurate reading. 37 degrees. "It's actually warmer than my outdoor cellar," he said in disbelief. "My cellar is 25 degrees and 8 feet underground. This is 37 degrees and 7 feet below your warm cabin floor. This contradicts everything I thought I understood about cold and storage. Your outdoor cellar is exposed to exterior temperature extremes with only earth insulation," Kate explained patiently. "When it's -10 outside sustained for 2 weeks, the earth can't maintain warmth against that penetration. The cold winds. My cellar benefits from the cabin heat above, preventing that freezing penetration, while the earth depth and stone mass prevent it from getting too warm. The cabin heat is controlled. Insulation prevents freezing without causing warmth problems." Eric touched the stone walls, running his hand over the mortared surface. "These walls are massive. Must be 3 tons of stone here. This is thermal massi. Use it in my house fireplace. Absorbs heat slowly, releases it slowly, resists rapid temperature changes." 6 tons, actually, Kate corrected. 300 stones, average 40 pounds each, combined with 7 feet of earth depth and the insulation of the cabin floor above. The temperature stays stable between 35 and 40 degrees, regardless of exterior swings from -10 to 50 degrees. And ventilation. Eric noticed the pipes. Intake at floor level, exhaust at ceiling. Natural convection provides continuous air exchange without creating drafts that would destabilize temperature. The produce stays fresh without ethylene buildup. Eric purchased 20 pounds of potatoes. Kate charged fair price, but Eric insisted on paying premium given his desperation. More importantly, he asked Kate to teach him how to build an integrated cellar for next season. Over the next week, 5 families visited Kate's cabin, descended into her cellar, saw perfect food storage at stable temperature while their outdoor cellars had failed. All asked for help designing similar systems. By spring 1877, Kate had become consulting engineer for integrated cellar design. She'd help neighbors plan excavations, design ventilation systems, calculate thermal requirements. 8 families built integrated cellars during summer 1877 using her design principles. The work provided income and status unusual for a widow. She was paid in labor barter, sometimes currency, sometimes goods. The community respect exceeded anything she'd had as Lars's wife. Kate married again in 1878, at age 32, a carpenter named Olaf Thorson, who appreciated engineering and valued Kate's technical intelligence. They expanded the cabin and cellar system, creating an even larger, integrated storage with improved ventilation. Kate lived until 1939, dying at age 91. Her obituary mentioned her Norwegian heritage and her widowhood, but focused primarily on the integrated root cellar, the undercabin storage system that maintained perfect conditions through temperature extremes and proved that the best solution wasn't always the conventional one. The original Lindholm cabin with integrated cellar remained functional until 1954, when it was documented before demolition. Modern analysis confirmed the thermal efficiency. Conventional outdoor cellars subject to exterior temperature extremes. Integrated cellars maintaining stable 35 to 38 degrees via thermal balance between cabin heat and earth insulation. The story is about a widow who understood that where you store food matters as much as how much food you store, who recognized that Minnesota temperature extremes made outdoor cellars fundamentally unreliable regardless of construction quality, who proved that integrating systems rather than separating them could solve problems conventional thinking couldn't. Because sometimes the best storage isn't the most isolated, it's the most carefully integrated into existing systems. The root cellar, everyone called dangerous, was actually superior thermal engineering, and building beneath the cabin wasn't risking collapse, was creating stability through intelligent design.